All right. Well, now Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Friday. It's a free-for-all. And I hope you'll join me. 240-242-5646. Your comments are always welcome. Your concerns, even if it's not on a topic that I have addressed in the show that you call. So anything about anything is welcome. It is what we're trying to do here. Build a community where our concerns are heard and the solutions are sought. That's what Halitics is all about. We do hope you'll subscribe, of course. You can do that right there on, there we go. Yeah, subscribe. You can see the bell ringing in the bottom right corner. There's also a like button for you. Please do click that. Even if you've subscribed, you can always click the like button unless you have already done that. Then don't click it a second time because then you'll be removing your like. But any kind of interaction with the video is welcome. It helps us get the word out. And we are seeing some movement, some more viewers are coming online, some more subscribers. So that's always welcome. And yes, I want to cut through all this and become a player, somebody that, hey, if I do a video, other hosts will discuss it. That's where I want to be. I think we want to be part of that conversation. Yeah, it's over the bell. All right, yeah, want more, do click on the Halitics group as well. Join us on Halitics on Facebook. I think it's a really good resource for people who want to continue the conversation, want to keep it going even when I'm not broadcasting live. We center Gaza. That's what we do here at Halitics. That is the story of the millennium, no question about it. And I wish it weren't. Wish we didn't have to talk about this horrific situation. A lot of kind of information news coming online today pertinent to what we talk about on Halitics. So I want to really address it. I don't know that it will be the entirety of the program, but it will be a very significant part of today's Halitics today, Friday. Of course, the 25th day of July. And the death toll jumped. The number from Anadolu Ajansi jumped over 400 from the last count that I found. The last count I found was, I think, posted yesterday. And I don't know that there were over 400 killed by Israel, but because of the discovery of bodies in the rubble, that number did jump to 59,700. Again, this is a severe undercount. The genocide has almost certainly claimed hundreds of thousands. And I posted in, I think it was Halitics, maybe it was both Halitics and my Facebook page, my personal page, that there are still people in denial. Despite all the images that you see of starving children, there are still people who insist that it isn't happening, or to the extent that a few, eggs are being broken in order to make an omelet. Well, this is all on Hamas. That's the response that you get from some folks. But their numbers, the deniers, right? The people who just look facts in the face, who look atrocities in the eye, who are simply willing to say, no, this isn't happening, or this is Hamas's fault. Hamas is actually taking children and putting them in front of Israeli snipers and moving their bodies so that their chests and heads get hit by the sniper bullet. The people who actually claim that are thankfully growing smaller, but tragically the number of Gazans is also shrinking as well. And I even saw a meme by somebody claiming that there's been an increase in the Gazan population since October 7. That is without question false. There's zero. It's interesting because the memes that totally belie reality, that you look at and you say this can't be true, so often, almost invariably, there's no links, there's no citations, there's just a bald assertion that it just can't be true. And when you see that, when you see somebody post something like that, claiming that Gaza is thriving, just, is doing better under Israel than it did under Hamas. When people post stuff like that, The right reaction is, yes, to be gobsmacked, by the sheer dishonesty that people can present such an enormous lie. And then to say, okay, this person just lost credibility, that they're not believable in any way. When you say that this is Hamas's fault, or you say Gaza isn't really suffering starvation, or it's because of roving gangs, or some utter complete nonsense that everyone who is credible, the many thousands on the ground, even Israeli soldiers who have come clean, have said, no, this is Israel's actions. This is Israel and the United States that are responsible for this genocide. When you see people who deny that, then they are to be canceled. They really are. I mean, I don't like to cancel people. I don't believe in that. People can express all sorts of views that I find very loathsome, despicable, dishonest. But hey, if they'll work with me to get, say, Medicare for all, or to build a third party that will challenge the elites, even if something like tariffs, I'll work with people on discrete issues. If you're going to deny the genocide, if you're going to make excuses for Israel, you're making it really, really, really tough for me to view you as someone who could be an ally in any issue. And I don't say that lightly. It's hard for me to reject anybody who stands with me on an issue that I feel is important. But this is the defining issue. This is the litmus test. If you aren't foursquare against the Israeli-American genocide, then you kind of have renounced your humanity. That's kind of where you are right now, in my opinion. And again, I don't say that lightly, but to look at the starving children, to know that, and beyond that, if people say, well, you can always fake pictures, then I would say, what about the images, even in your New York Times, even your liberal rags, that show the entire region leveled, razed to the ground? The statements by Netanyahu calling the Palestine Amalek, which is a region to be utterly destroyed by Israel. There's just way, way, way too much there to consider this anything but a whole-scale human atrocity, a war crime comparable to, in some ways worse, although not in quantity, but in quality. In some ways, I mean, it's hard to say it could be worse than the Holocaust. I probably wouldn't say it's worse, but certainly on par with the Holocaust. At least 59,676 Palestinians have now been killed, according to Anadolu Ajansi. Again, that's a fraction of the total number of deaths at the hands of Israel, Biden, and Trump have been killed since the war, since Israel used October 7 as a pretext to commit genocide, full scale, to amp up its ethnic cleansing. According to the Ministry of Health, 89 bodies were brought into the hospitals of Gaza that I can't even believe that any are functioning. And I'm just going to show this number real quick because it does show that there's some question as to the real, as to how many were killed yesterday, how many are newly discovered bodies in the rubble, how many have been added to the count that were not people who were not necessarily killed yesterday or in the past few days. So you see there with, again, from the health ministry there, 8,527 people killed since March 18 of this year. And I'll give you the kind of the slide I do here, which tries to kind of put it all together. And what I have said is we're seeing an increase of over 400. I mentioned that earlier. Israel and the U.S. have now killed a minimum of 59,676 Gazans, representing an increase of 457 since yesterday's report. And let me just correct that one number there. That's through the 24th. Trump and Netanyahu, probably through the 25th, even 24, 25, through July 24, 25. We'll just do that. Trump and Netanyahu have killed at least 8,527 Gazans, and including likely over 4,000 women and children. Yeah. I mean, again, I think I'm pretty good with the words. I know I have a big vocabulary, but they do fail in times like this, in times of crimes of this, extraordinary size, nature, and just sheer evil. And we're going to talk about some of the responses to this, and why, despite more and more worldwide disapprobation, more criticism, even from many in the Jewish community now, even from institutional Jews, not just like people like me and students and so many folks who are with Code Pink. Many of the people when I'm down on the Hill with Code Pink are Jewish, that are standing foursquare with Palestine, with Gaza, and completely against Israel. We've totally rejected Zionism, the Zionist line. So many of us are Jewish. But institutional Jews and Jewish institutions have been very, very slow to condemn Israel. It's obviously to their everlasting shame. But they're starting to acknowledge it. I mean, you just can't, if you have any humanity left in you, if you're willing to be somewhat, and this was interesting because I talked to Andy about this yesterday. He said he doesn't want politicians who are going to vote their conscience. He wants politicians who are going to vote the way he wants. And I get that. I mean, I feel like that too. But I would say that the real problem is more often than not politicians, institutional leaders, people like PDA, who run groups like Progressive Democrats of America, kind of my new punching bag, along with Our Revolution, that the leaders of those institutions, they probably on balance get it, right? They probably on balance. This may not be true for PDA. I think it is true for Our Revolution based on my knowledge of the leadership. They get that the Democratic Party is corrupt. The Democratic Party is not redeemable. They get that, I think. But, their role as leaders of somewhat somewhat well-known and quoted institutions prevents them from being fully critical, fully honest about what the Democratic Party is. Because if they did that, they would stop getting quoted in the New York Times. They would stop getting interviewed. Look at the Green Party. Nobody talks to Butch Ware. Nobody talks to, I do. Nobody talks to Andy Ellis but me and a few others. You lose access to the media almost completely when you acknowledge the deep evil in both parties that is, infests those from the top. So if you're going to run an institution that makes money by, raises funds from Democrats, loyal Democrats, maybe they believe you can move the party to the left, what have you, you're not going to bite that hand that feeds you. They're tied into the Democratic Party. But the truth is now just so plain to see. The images of starving children and the reports, even that the New York Times now and again, the truth does seep into its pages. The doctors reporting how Israel is targeting children, shooting them in the head, shooting them in the chest, seeing the x-rays where you see a bullet in the cranium of a Palestinian child. Even there, now and again, the truth does come to the light in liberal media in this country, and it's becoming harder and harder for anyone who's not just fully invested in the establishment and elitist politics to deny it. So here's Boston Magazine. This is just a regular old establishment magazine. This is not some sort of lefty. This is not even alternative. A lot of papers, I know in Monterey, they have the Monterey Weekly. there are lots of these alternative type journals, but that's not Boston. Boston.com is more like New York Magazine, the Washingtonian, and this in Boston.com. You can't deny it. It's right there. This is right now. Dozens of kids and adults in Gaza have starved to death in July as hunger surges. This is the beginning of population death spiral. And this article accompanies or is accompanied by images of starving Gazan children, skeletal children looking like the Auschwitz and other, I think Bergen-Belsen, they showed a death pit. I remember seeing an image of a death pit with skeletons in it, or virtual skeletons. So that's what these children look like at the hands of Israel. So even corporate establishment, for-profit media is kind of having trouble denying the reality. The sad part, of course, is that it's too late. It's too late. When you could have maybe stopped this, you didn't. You made excuses. You made explanations. You let every story off with, this began when Israel was attacked by Hamas brutally. That kind of tendentious, very partisan, propaganda-like media reportage. The article, as I mentioned, I'm not going to show it, has pictures of starving kids. I did have one of those pictures in one of my videos this week, and I converted that from available to all to 18 and over only. I don't want to have to do that. I'd rather not change the videos and just say they're only for people over 18. So I'm not showing the images. They're very easy to find online. They also horrify me and sicken me and sadden me to a point where it becomes hard to do the live stream. So I generally will not be showing those incredibly awful images, but they are certainly available. And so there you see that headline. I'll give it to you in full. But as I mentioned, even those who have inclined to, who are by virtue of ethnicity, religion, history, institutional ties, are loath to criticize Israel, are kind of coming out of the woodwork. So this is from the Jewish Telegraph Agency, I believe, reporting, and that's, by the way, a very Zionist publication, very pro-Israel, and they don't report the story with approval. They're critical. They don't like this fact, but they're acknowledging that it's happening. Hundreds of rabbis across at least 4 continents and from a range of denominations are calling for Israel. They signed a letter calling for Israel to deliver more aid to Gaza. And it notes with more signing on by the minute. The letter originated from 3 rabbis, one in London, one in, I believe, Boston, and then a third who's in Israel. So 3 countries with sizable Jewish populations, and obviously very influential when it comes to Israel, the US, the UK, and Israel itself. So even in Israel, you're seeing a little bit, and I know most Israelis are indifferent at best to the plight of the Palestinian people at their hands. But even in Israel now, there's recognition that what Israel is doing is evil. It's unforgivable. It's a crime of, beyond belief, beyond humanity. So here's what the rabbis wrote. The Jewish people face a grave moral crisis, threatening the very basis of Judaism as the ethical voice that has been since the age of Israel's prophets. So has it been an ethical voice? I used to really, truly believe that. I used to think, Jews, we've been victims. I didn't think of myself ever as a victim when I was a kid growing up. I might have been bullied a little bit, but I was kind of such a jerk that now that I look back on it, I feel like I probably deserved a lot more than I got. But regardless, I didn't perceive myself to be a victim then, and I certainly don't now. And I never thought because I was Jewish, I was a victim. But I did believe Jewish people had throughout the ages been victimized mainly by their Christian neighbors. And I think that's true. It's not you can't really deny it. And I thought, well, we've been hurt. We've been attacked. There have been pogroms and genocides against us. And yet we have been a voice again for peace, for civil rights. One of the, I think, prides of the Jewish experience in the United States has been being leaders in the civil rights movement. So there's that. And I would take pride in that. But to claim, as the rabbis do, and as I believed once upon a time, that Judaism is an ethical voice, as is the ethical voice, I don't believe there's some sort of something special or chosen about Jews that makes us better than others, just as I don't think we're worse. Although right now, the crime of the millennium is being committed by Jewish leaders with Trump, with American leaders as well, many of whom are not Jewish. But I agree with Rabbis Wittenberg in London, Art Green in Boston, Ariel Pollack in Tel Aviv. You cannot remain silent. It's not an acceptable response. And I'm glad they're saying that. I truly am. Just to get a little more about this. And then, is this enough? Is this something? Is this meaningful? Where's my... Yeah. So we saw that. And then they're also, what I think is good about this letter, and maybe it will have some impact, and it could have impact, because if liberal Zionists in the United States, in the UK, in Israel, stop giving money to Israel, stop supporting Israel, start boycotting Israel, they leading it, pressuring their representatives, members of parliament, obviously in this country, Congress members and senators, U.S. senators, that could make a difference. The severe limitation placed on humanitarian relief in Gaza and the policy of withholding food, water, and medical supplies from a needy civilian population contradict essential values of Judaism as we understand it. So they're clear, they're specific. They're saying you're starving them. You're starving the people of Gaza. It's something. It is. It's not enough, but nothing's enough. I don't know what would be enough. I saw a post on Facebook where one person said they felt shame at what the U.S. was doing, supporting the Israeli genocide. And another person said, well, I don't feel shame because I'm not doing it. I oppose it. I'm standing up against it. And my response is, I do feel shame. No, I didn't vote for Trump. I did vote for Biden in 2020. So, I guess to a degree, by voting for him, I'm somewhat responsible. I did not vote for Howie Hawkins, who was the Green Party. I would have maybe voted for Jill Stein at that point, but she wasn't running. So I could sort of take ownership because I voted for Biden, but I don't. That's not why I feel shame. I feel shame because I'm not doing enough. I mean, and I said this, I do talk about this every day on my program with a very limited audience. I hope it has some impact, some effect. I post on social media. Again, a few people see what I post. Maybe it makes a difference to a few people. I go to the Hill. But you know what I don't do? I've never done this. I don't put my freedom on the line. In other words, I don't put myself in a place where I could be arrested, my freedom, my physical safety. I have not done that. I don't put my fortune, my money. I mean, I contribute, but I haven't put my financial security at risk, which again, I could, and I think some people do. So there's a limit, right? There's a limit. I don't put my physical safety, I don't put my liberty, my freedom of movement, and I don't put my money, my security. I mean, I contribute some. I don't say I don't, but it's in the end, I am jealous of preserving the privileges that I do enjoy. And I don't really think being able to walk outside, breathe the air, the supercharged, super hot, superheated air we breathe in now, I don't view that as a privilege. That's what we all should have. We should all have freedom. Yeah, like I said, freedom of movement. We should all have security from being abused, beaten up by cops or by thugs, armed thugs that are, acting with the state approval imprimatur, like the ICE people or gangs of Zionist thugs that the University of California, Los Angeles police are overlooking, or just letting them do their abuse. But we should all be free. So I don't view that as a privilege. I think economically my security puts me in a privileged class, but we should all be economically secure as well. And I'm not prepared to give up those things. I know that Chris Hedges has talked about this and said maybe we need to be, maybe we should be. Again, I think we're asking for some people will do that. Some people will give up everything for others. I'm not there. And for that, I do feel shame. But that's a price. The shame is a price I'll pay. But the bigger price, which perhaps we should pay, we should all be willing to pay. I'm not, and I would never ask anyone else to either. 240-242-5646 if you want to comment on this. 240-242-5646. Let me continue with the letter from the rabbis because it's powerful. And again, the rabbis, isn't it? Well, again, it's late. It's a day late. It's $1 short, but better late than never is my response. And we are again seeing real change it could not be clearer at this point that public opinion, public sentiment in many different places has turned against Israel. So these rabbis, they're criticizing Israel. Boston.com magazine criticizing Israel, calling out the starvation of children that Israel is part of, is responsible for. And we do have a caller. We'll get to you in just a sec, caller. I promise. Give me 1 second. Let me just read this from the letter by the rabbis, or at least it's from JTA, and then they quote from the letter by the rabbis. Rabbi Jill Jacobs of Trua, a rabbinic human rights group, issued an open call for American Jewish groups to acknowledge and contend with the aid crisis and the cost of war. It is time for American Jewry to take an account of how many of our communal institutions and leaders are continuing. This is really a big deal, too. They're calling out, Rabbi Jacobs is calling out those rabbis who continue to defend and support Israel, which is leaving an unbearable path of death and destruction in its wake. And she also, in her article, or someone at the Jewish Forward, included a picture of starving Gazan children. So this is a big deal again. And one thing that's really important about this is that in Jewish American society, and especially when you get to the conservative and certainly Orthodox and even further, even more devout denominations, there's a tremendous amount of shaming going on of Jews, especially, who criticize Israel. And they are attacked. I'm attacked. You're a self-hating Jew. How dare you, Ginsburg, criticize Israel? Your grandparents would be turning over in their grave. I mean, you hear all that nonsense. So what I like to see here is the converse, where rabbis, where Jewish leaders are saying, no, 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 the people who should be ashamed, the people who should be embarrassed are the ones who are supporting Israel, who are defending Israel. That's the action that is anti-Jewish. That's the action that deserves the harshest condemnation, defending Israel. Caller, I got you. Is this, you know what? I never know. It's Ari, right? But maybe not. Is this Ari?
It's Stephanie. Hi, Hal.
Oh, hey, Stephanie. You know what? You and Ari must have similar phone numbers or something. I don't know what it. I should add you to my book so I'll see it. I'm going to try to do that. What's on your mind, Steph?
Well, number one, Hal, just thank you so much for your voice. More people should be hearing it, and I see what I can do on that score.
Well, just if I know you subscribe, if you haven't liked, make a comment of some sort. And I'm not trying to be, obnoxious about it, but that's that would help. That's a great thing, and it's so easy to do. So yeah, any comment, any interaction.
Absolutely. So 2 points about the things that you've been covering. One is on the shame, and the other one is on what should Jewish people in America be doing. And I'm just going to admit complete ignorance here. Like, my background I am not Jewish. I come from a kind of generically Christian American Protestant background, but my parents were not religious, so I wasn't really raised religiously. We had Jewish friends, but I didn't know what all that meant. And when I went to college, a lot of my best friends in college were Jewish, and one was someone who I had helped work to elect to the president of our of our government student body and our student government association. And he was a very humanistic guy. He was always in favor of policies to help people. We were on college Democrats together. He was very liberal. And then one day the topic of something involving the Middle East came up, and he made a statement. I'm not sure these were his exact words, but it was like, all Arabs are animals. And it really did not compute for me, because I didn't understand how this person who was so educated, liberal, humanistic in his views and his values, as a friend of mine who was also Jewish, could then have this giant black hole of lack of empathy for an entire group of people. And it may have been a discussion of Israel-Palestine, but it was along those lines. So it was because of that cognitive dissonance that I actually took it upon myself to learn about the history of Israel and Palestine and kind of put a dent in my ignorance. But my appeal would be, it is a deviation from what I know to be, at least from, as an outsider seeing Jewish values, that value, humanity, the people who fought for civil rights, the white people who were involved in the civil rights movement here in the United States were many Jewish. And it is an absolute black hole in the values to not be standing up right now. It's so out of character, okay? And then the other thing is on the shame, and I just want to say I share it with you. I do feel like the only thing that could potentially make a big difference is if physically, a bunch of Americans physically went and tried to get into Gaza, because we would be putting our lives on the line. But I haven't done that, and so I feel shame as well about that, because you can't help but feel that we're witnessing something that's our generation's Holocaust. You can't help but feel that, and
yeah, no, and I can sort of hear the tear in your voice, I think, Stephanie. And I was thinking about this with World War II, and what if I had been like 18 or 20 or what have you, and I'm now in my 60s, so it's different in terms of the age. But I think I might well have gone over. I don't know, maybe not. But people say, hey, the way you're acting now is the way you would have acted then. But I think maybe when I was, a teen or young 20s, maybe I would have gone over to the United Kingdom and joined the Royal Air Force, or certainly signed up for the U.S. Army once as my forebears did, my great uncle and people who were in that age that would have been enlisted or officers in World War II. They did. And I think if there was some sort of a vehicle, an institution I could join, and like Code Pink, maybe I would. I don't know, but that we don't have that. The resistance to Israel, the resistance to the United States is just not. It's not organized the way it was against the Nazis. A, and B, our country now is the bad guy, and that makes it, I think, tougher too to stand up.
Yeah, and honestly, I consider this as much us doing this as Israel. absolutely, they couldn't be doing it without us. So it's on us.
Yeah. All right, Stephanie, anything else? I hope you have a good weekend to the extent you can, despite what's going on. I think it's hard for all of us now, though, to be, live our lives the way we tried to before this.
Yeah, it's on your mind all the time, Hal, but thank you so much. I keep speaking out, and I'll like your stream and promote it.
I love your calls. Thank you so much. That's Stephanie checking in. Really appreciate it. And she and I know each other from organizing. We were both part of the Our Revolution Maryland team, and it was a great honor for me to work with her. And I am going to try to add her to my group. I don't know why. For some reason, I'm having trouble adding. I don't know. Nobody wants to hear my tales of woe when it comes to technology. That's like the world's most boring conversation. Except I actually subscribe. This is what a nerd I am. I do subscribe to some of the tech channels. It's partly to make this hopefully improve the quality of my stream, because I can maybe learn tricks and learn how to use some of the software packages that are very complicated that I use. Maybe there's certain things they have, certain apps or what have you that are part of these packages that would help me do a better stream. So that's part of it. But also I do find it but somewhat of some interest. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me, as Stephanie did. Really appreciate that call. And we did talk about how there are Jewish groups now, Jewish rabbis speaking out against the Holocaust in Gaza. And now France, longtime ally of Israel, obviously. Their president, Macron, says that France is going to recognize a Palestinian state. And I think this has some meaning. The Washington Post apparently does too. They certainly use, they borrow liberally from Israeli Hasbara in their headline, their subheadline. France will recognize a Palestinian state. What does that mean? And later on in the article, I don't have it, not much. And I kind of hate to admit, but I think maybe not much, unless you see, again, this announcement leads to other Western nations also recognizing Palestine and together demanding that the U.S. stop supporting Israel. I think if there was true unity in the EU against the U.S. support for Israel, that could make a difference. So you hope this is a harbinger. The Post, of course, critical of the decision, saying this could lead Hamas to take a harder line. I don't know how Hamas could take a harder line. Hamas has basically given in and said, if you just stop killing us, if you just stop destroying every last square inch of Gaza, we'll release the hostages. We just need some kind of confirmation, some sort of assurances from the United States and the world community that you're going to rein Israel in, and we will release the hostages. So they're not going to change that. They just want their people to not be wiped off the face of the earth. That's Hamas's position. So it's a ridiculous sub-headline by the Washington Post that somehow this is going to embolden Hamas. That's ridiculous. What I'm afraid of, I think more than anything else, is that Israel, and by the way, this happened during the Holocaust in the 20th century as well, the Nazis. They got to a point, people like Himmler and others. Hitler was, certainly gone insane. If he wasn't always, probably always insane. But they had embraced evil to a point where they knew, and you see this also with like serial killers, bank robbers like Bonnie and Clyde. Once you kill somebody, then you've kind of taken an irrevocable step, and it becomes easier to keep killing. I know that's what they say in the mafia, right? Who knows if this is true? I think this was in The Sopranos, I'm taking it, but it seems reasonable to me. It seems credible. The first one, you feel lousy. First person you kill, you feel crappy. You feel sick about it. The second one, it's no picnic. I think that's what Michael Imperioli said, Chrissy on The Sopranos, I think. The second one's no picnic. But after a while, maybe that was Gandolfini in a different movie. But after a while, yeah, you just part of the, just do it. You just kill people and you don't even think about it anymore. And I think what Israel's now at that point where, yes, they've gone completely to the dark side. They've embraced evil. And there's no point in stopping from their perspective, because if they stop, that's when they could be held accountable. And at some point, they're going to get, some of them maybe will be held accountable, as the Nazis ultimately were. Some of them were. So, what the hell? In for a dime, in for a dozen, I think is the attitude that they probably have now. The leaders in the military, certainly Netanyahu. I got nothing to lose to keep killing people. And I've already lost my soul. I've already lost my humanity. So why not keep killing? I'm pretty confident. And I think that's probably where Trump is too. It doesn't, we've lost the humanity that we once possessed. So it doesn't matter now. Our crime is so enormous that killing another 100,000, another 500,000, wiping the entire population off the map, it's no more enormous than what we've already done. I think that's where they are. So I'm pessimistic, for sure. I mean, how could you not be? So here's what Macron, now the France recognition, they haven't yet done it. They say they will. Better than nothing, for sure. But even here, the French, and I'm not going to demonize, look, people make fun of the French and they tell jokes. You know what? I've been to France. I like France. I like French food. I like French art. I like French architecture. Paris is a beautiful city. I've been small towns in France, really nice. The chateaus, I mean, everything. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. There's just no question about it. I don't have any animus towards the French versus anybody else. But this is very, very weak. Macron's announcement also called for Hamas to be demilitarized. Why are you doing that? Why are you weakening what actually is kind of a moral stance? We're going to recognize Palestine. Well, we'll recognize them, but they've got to demilitarize Hamas first, or that's got to be part of this, or we're only going to recognize it at the same time as we call for Hamas to be demilitarized. Wait a second. If you're going to recognize Palestine as a country, as a state, as a nation, if you're going to do that, then don't they get to decide their leadership? Don't they get to decide who represents them? If they vote for Hamas, now maybe they won't. I'm not saying they should. I'm not saying Hamas has been a good leader for Palestine. I'm going to say you're in a spot where there's no one who could be a good leader, because Israel's going to crush you like a walnut in a vice, no matter what, and keep turning and turning and turning that vice until the walnut is completely crushed. That's what Israel is doing. And I don't know what any leader or leadership group could do differently to change that. But I'm not going to say, yeah, Hamas has been great either. I've had people say, oh, Hamas is really, I'm not going to judge them. I don't judge the victims. I judge the victimizers. I judge the people with power. I judge the people with the guns and the tanks and the missiles and the missile shields, thank you, AOC, that protects them as they rain death and destruction on others. That's who I blame. But so I don't, I totally reject Macron's call for Hamas to be demilitarized. That shouldn't be part of this conversation. Palestine is being destroyed by Israel. Now you're saying they're one quasi-militia organization. You want to take away their ability to inflict a little bit of damage on their persecutors. No, I'm not going to do that. Why is France doing? Well, by the way, this is something I was really thinking about, and why people like, and I mentioned this earlier this week, it is a free-for-all. So referencing the cancellation of Colbert. They're so out of touch, right? These leaders, these people who are saying, oh, Mamdani's call for arresting, say, Netanyahu and his criticisms of Israel. You can't do that in New York. How dare you? You need to, as Colbert said, well, does Israel have a right even to admit they have a right to exist? Those kind of questions. You use terms like global, or you don't globalize the intifada. People aren't there. I don't love that expression, read the room, but the room has shifted completely. So if you're going to argue that American politicians, as AOC, by the way, has said, oh, yes, we have rising anti-Semitism. If you're going to acknowledge, accept, repeat Zionist talking points, you're out of it. You're not where the American people are now. You might do it for money. You might do it because the influence of the Zionist lobby, the pro-Israel lobby, is so out of proportion to what people in this country believe, right? That the pressure to support Israel no matter what, and not to acknowledge even the humanity of Palestinians, the pressure is so great that politicians will often cave to it, and others too. But that's not where we are as a people. We're not there. We're not in that camp. Where we are as a people is Israel's wrong. Israel's committing crimes. The Gazan people are being destroyed, and it's wrong. That's where we are. That's where they are in Europe too. Public support for Israel has plummeted in Western Europe, just like here, including France. So Macron kind of had to do something there. He doesn't get a lot of credit for bravery, but he did it, so I guess that's good. Images of starving children only add to the pressure Macron faces and other leaders. So basically exactly the same as what's going on with the rabbis, except the rabbis, they're under a lot of pressure not to criticize Israel. And rabbis who do criticize Israel sometimes put their own jobs at risk. So I guess we shouldn't be completely dismissive of what some of the folks speaking out are doing, and I won't be. And I'm glad Macron took a very limited step. He certainly reduced its impact by including Hamas in the statement. But yes, Palestine, of course, should be recognized as a nation. And yes, the rabbis are correct to demand accountability for Israel. I used in my description of today's program criticism, I criticized AOC. I think it was rabbis recoil, right? The rabbis are recoiling at Israel's evil. France recognizes, because they are recognizing the Palestinian people as a nation. And then AOC and her teammate, former teammate, Fiddle. And, like referencing, of course, Nero fiddling while Rome burned. And I think that's what we're seeing, not responding, not recognizing the enormity of the situation. And again, people say, well, you use AOC as a punching bag. She's only one of 438. They're all bad or almost all bad with very few exceptions. Why are you singling her out? And I single her out, and I thought it was a good point somebody made. But yes, Raskin is terrible too, right? And Presley and all of them are terrible. But Ocasio-Cortez is a self-appointed leader. She presents herself as the, progressive voice to a very significant degree. She shames people who criticize her. She shames progressives. She's trying, I think would say the evidence becomes clearer now that she is looking to become the successor, Chuck Schumer's successor in the U.S. Senate. So she's kind of put herself in a position to be criticized to a greater degree than other Democrats. But no, you shouldn't support any of them. You shouldn't support any of the Democrats who voted for Israel, as they almost all did, or any of the Republicans either. No, they all deserve to be voted down. What AOC represents is among the most progressive members of Congress. And yet she herself is wholly unacceptably pro-Israel, anti-Palestine. So if she is unacceptable, and she clearly is, then none of the Democrats deserve your support. Even Omar, even Tlaib, even Summer Lee, even Al Green, yes, they voted with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tom Massey to withhold funding for the Iron Dome, withhold the gift of the money for the Iron Dome. Yes, to their credit, they did that. But they did vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be the Democratic leader in the House. They could have voted no. They could have led in opposition. They didn't do that. And that was an evil. That was kind of a cornerstone evil. Because once your leader, who has so much power over committee assignments, over legislation, when you choose a Pelosi, when you choose a Jeffries, when you refuse to challenge them, then you're setting your party up as ultimately a worker of evil. AOC's office is vandalized after a vote on funds for Israel, defaced with red paint and a message citing the war in Gaza. The police are investigating. So I'm not going to condemn the person who did that. You know, a lot of people are. You hear this all the time. You know, people criticize Luigi Mangione for the killing of the CEO, the healthcare CEO. What people have to understand, who aren't really thinking about this, is that we have lost our ability as ordinary Americans to influence our government. We can't even influence our own representatives. They make decisions based on their own self-interest, based on corruption, based on how they've been corrupted, based on greed, based on ambition, right? She wants to be the next senator from the state of New York, U.S. senator, and not based on what's right. We're seeing this with Mom Donnie. Well, I won't say I'll discourage use of globalized intifada. I'm going to hire a former Obama apparatchik to run my campaign. And these decisions are often they don't work out well. They're counterproductive. They cost the politicians as much as they might benefit from them, but they make the calculus. I'm going to be part of the establishment. Even if I lose politically, I'll win financially. That's the calculus they make. And given that corruption, that level of rarefied air in which the electeds reside, so far above the riffraff, so far above people who just care about starving children, so far above people who just care about getting health care, that's no longer a concern of our electeds, even of our Democratic electeds, who have very significant and obvious degree. They no longer care, if they ever did, about poor, struggling, working, and even middle-class Americans. Their concerns are not the concerns of the elites. When you're at that point, you will respond with violence, because what else do you have left? So a pro-Palestine New Yorker who is like me, like you, utterly disgusted, sickened by, horrified at what we are doing and what Israel is doing, sees AOC vote to fund the Iron Dome, I can't blame them for defacing her office. I can't say, oh no, this is wrong. Vandalism is wrong. Well, vandalism is wrong, except in a case like this, it's not. Now there are also death threats. I don't like death threats. Yeah, I don't think we should threaten her. I don't like that. But again, what are people supposed to do? We're seeing the ultimate evil happening, and AOC is part of that. She's not fighting it. She is incredibly privileged. She could fight it far more aggressively, perhaps more effectively. She and Bernie barely talked about Palestine on their stupid fighting oligarchy tour that went over like a lead balloon in the end and has had no real impact. So again, if you're going to criticize those who are trying to change the policies of these, quote, progressives, progressives, if you're going to criticize their actions, then you got to come up with something better. You got to come up with a different suggestion. You got to tell me what will work. AOC does not respond directly to the vandalism. She shamed, she attacked those who criticized her, saying, hey, if you want to put your faith in neo-Nazis, meaning, I guess, Marjorie Taylor Greene be my guest. Again, totally non-responsive, unresponsive to the very, very legitimate concerns raised against her actions. And by the way, this is why also I'm not going to condemn so many people, raise January 6th, right? January 6th, 21, when the MAGA folks were roaming through the halls of Congress. I mean, it was scary. It did look a little like, or a lot like, an insurrection to me. I get it. But what are they supposed to do? Congress isn't. Now, I think their concerns were ridiculous. Trump didn't win that election. But I understand why people believe that, because institutions have completely marginalized them. And the response to January 6th by Congress, the Democrats, was so disheartening and so anti-democratic, rather than saying, hey, you know what? The Constitution says, plain and simple, you have a right to petition your government for grievances, and we have not listened to you. We have not heard the voices demanding some kind of health care, some kind of relief. This is, in 21 and 25, it gets even worse. We aren't hearing you. We're sorry. We're going to try to do better. Nothing. Complete zero, nada from them. Just a couple more points. So Miss Rachel, interesting. I saw this, and this goes again to the shaming, right? We talked about how the rabbis are saying, if you're Jewish, you got to look at your leaders and say, are you holding Israel accountable? Are you criticizing Israel? Are you criticizing Trump for supporting Israel? Are you criticizing Israeli leaders? If you haven't, you're wrong. You need to do that. So I appreciate the rabbis saying that to Jews. As a Jew, your duty is to speak out against evil. And Israel is the worker of evil now. So I appreciate that. It's an important response. It's an important antidote to those Jews who insist that Israel has to be back to the limit. And if you don't, then you're wrong, that you're Nazi, that you're minimizing Jews, the suffering of Jews. It's a very important corrective for the rabbis to say, no, the fault is not with those who criticize Israel. The fault lies with those who don't criticize Israel. So a very important corrective there. Also, I was really glad, this is Miss Rachel. Ms. Rachel, she's gotten a lot of attention. I never even knew who she was. I mean, maybe if my kids were 20 years younger, I would know. But she's a YouTuber with a huge audience, social media phenomenon who does videos and posts for children. And it's beautiful. I love that. It's a great thing. And she has expressed on various occasions empathy for the victims in Gaza, Israel's victims, America's victims. She's shown real concern for them. She's gotten a lot of heat for it. She's been criticized. I think the ADL went after her. The New York Times had a BS story about her. And she kind of a little bit, I think, wiggled a little bit, started talking about she has concern for Israel's victims too. And I'm like, no, please don't. That's not, you don't need to talk about that. That's not a problem. The problem is what Israel's doing. So I wish she hadn't done that. But this is a really important correction to all the doxing out there, right? College students. if they go to protests against Israel, now they're facing expulsion. Trump is demanding, he got Colombia, to sign off, the cowards there, to sign off on a $200 million settlement that Colombia is paying the federal government, and the student protesters are going to be subject to serious discipline, which means either real clear, this is what it means, either multiple year suspension or expulsion. If you take on the Israel-American war machine, if you take that on, you put yourself at grave risk. You may not get hired, even if you manage to make it through college, you got your degree, maybe you already got your degree, you graduated or what have you. If your pictures, you're doxxed, your pictures put on some website and some law firm, doesn't want to take on anything controversial, so they don't. They go to some firm that uses AI, and they figure, this person, they take pictures of everybody, they put them on the internet, where have they been videotaped, where are they? So you do that, you put your future on hold, perhaps. So I love what Ms. Rachel said in response. Hey, if you want to work with me, you better be for Gaza. You better have already come out. I know if you want to be, an 80-hour-a-week associate at a New York law firm and make your $200,000 or whatever their starting salaries are now for a 25-year-old, you want to make that kind of money, I get it. You better not be pro-Gaza. Well, I'm the response to that. If you aren't pro-Gaza, it's not even just that you haven't come out for Israel. If you haven't come out for Gaza, I ain't working with you. So I think that is a very moral stance. Because as I pointed out, if you're not on the record as pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, then you flunked this test. You really have. Now, would I say that to a German in 1938 or 1942? Well, if you didn't come out publicly for Israel, for Jews rather, and against the Nazis, you flunked the test. I wouldn't say that, because if you did that in Nazi Germany, you probably would, at a minimum, assuming you're a Christian, go to a concentration camp to get your mind right, for them to get your mind right at a minimum. So you would be putting your freedom, your fortune, at risk, at grave risk, your bodily integrity, if you criticize the Nazis. We're not there yet in this country, but we're close. But I think there needs to be a cost paid, a price paid for those who refuse to condemn Israel. I think that's right. And I've never been one of those who believe, remember, what was it, the anti-racism? Either you're a racist or you're an anti-racist. I don't subscribe to that kind of black and white thinking. But I'll say this, either you're anti-genocide or you're pro-genocide. And one of the reasons I would say, well, either an anti-racist or you're for racism, racism is kind of a little different. That's an ism. And people can argue, well, is it racism or isn't, right? Like if you say, well, I don't support affirmative action, some would say, well, then you're a racist. You can't be, unless you're an anti-racist, then you're a racist. But I would respond, well, but I am for Medicare for all. I believe everybody in this country, regardless of race, color, whatever, should have health care. I believe in universal job programs. Everyone should have a job. I believe everyone should have a decent quality of life and no one should have too much. So even though I'm not for necessarily affirmative action, I believe in policies that will greatly reduce unfairness, inequality, injustice, poverty. Now, you want to call that racist? Well, call it racist, but I don't see it that way. But I do think genocide is a real thing. It's where you're going to wipe a population off the map. And that's what's happening right now. Murder. Children, innocent children starved to death. I don't see how you can be on the sidelines on that issue. And Ms. Rachel is saying you can't be. You want to work for me? You got to speak. You got to have spoken out about Gaza. When I saw this post, I was I looked at it closely, and I actually checked it to see whether it was AI, because there is a typo, and I saw that. But I did check this. Apparently, USA Today reported this. To anyone asking to with work with me, to anyone asking to with work with me who hasn't spoken out about Gaza. So that's where I saw that and say, wait, is that really her? And is Ms. Rachel for Little's a real thing? But I looked it up. There is an Instagram page. I think that's where this came from. And USA Today did, in fact, reproduce that quote with that typo, with that, word vocabulary error. So good for you, Ms. Rachel. And I did comment on it. I mentioned Mangione as well. I saw this post, and I want to just finish with this, and then we're going to call it a show. I actually have a clip from, I had said it was, by the way, I had billboarded this as both AOC and her teammate fiddling. But I won't get to the teammate, but I have the video of former, I guess, staffer of hers with Brianna Joy Gray. And I was really pretty much astonished by some of the comments by that staffer. So we'll talk about those Monday. But here's what the comment with regard to Ms. Rachel and her declamation, I will not work with people who have not spoken out against Gaza. So this person wrote, I want Palestine to be as free as I want Luigi Mangione. So I wasn't certain if they were being a little bit ironic, like I really don't want Mangione to be free, but I think they were being serious. They were saying, yeah, I want Mangione to be free just like I want Palestine to be free. And I want to be clear, I'm not equating the two. They're not the same. Somebody who kills a healthcare executive isn't the same as starving children. They're morally very, very different. You are taking a life when you shoot a healthcare executive. I think in this case, it's understandable. And if I were on a jury, I probably would actually vote to acquit. But that said, they're not the same. I get it. But here's how I think there is a similarity. And that's why I said it and why I like this post. And I think it's important to think about. Luigi is a victim of a cruel system who lashed out. He's the victim of this for-profit healthcare system who lashed out. And I understand he's from a middle-class background, but I understand there were also some really serious health costs that he was facing. He lashed out against oppressors, right? The for-profit healthcare system, and specifically targeting the CEO of the company. Much as, so here's the similarity, Hamas lashed out against criminal oppressors on October 7th. And if you say, well, the people at the music festival weren't oppressors the way the CEO of the healthcare company is, I think that's true. But I also think it's important to understand that it is the nation of Israel, it's the Jewish state that is oppressing Palestine. That doesn't mean it was okay. I don't endorse what Hamas did. But I'm not going to sit here and condemn the group that represents the oppressors. So he lashed out against criminal oppressors on October 7th. And now, because of that act, the entire nation of Palestinians is paying the ultimate price. So I do want to see Palestine free, of course. And I would like to see Mangione free. I'm much greater, but there's limits to that analogy. But I didn't want to share it because I see some similarity. It's people who may commit an act that is criminal, that we view as criminal, whether it's Hamas or Mangione, but under tremendous pressure, duress. And when it comes to what Israel's doing in response, it's wholly, the worst crime there could be, the worst thing they could do. Cannot be in any way countenanced, accepted, even understood, really. I mean, I understand it, but, I think one of the criticism, people who said, you shouldn't even try to understand the Nazis because if you understand, you excuse. No, I don't excuse, but I do understand. And it's important to understand because if we understand, then we can say, well, this is what we can maybe do to stop it from happening again, which we have to do. But the perpetrators of the Holocaust in Gaza really do need if there's justice, they will be in the dock at the International Criminal Court. I wouldn't execute them. I don't believe in the death penalty, but they would. Bibi, Smotrich, Gallant, Trump, Biden, they'd all be incarcerated for the rest of their lives. All right. Thank you for being part of Halitics. I will be back Monday. Hope you have a great weekend. And again, please, if possible, if you can bring yourself to that incredibly difficult, heavy lift, subscribe now, click like,